Morning. Thank you for having me. Well, good evening for you. Um, my name is Sandra Graves. I am the president and founder of Anova Industries LLC based in Houston, Texas. We are a provider for premium used refurbished equipment for the bulk liquid industries, including ISO tank containers, container chassis for the intermodal industries, accessory equipment as well, such as GPS, telemetry, pumps, refrigeration or heating systems, the different types of things that you would need to go with your ISO tank, et cetera, things of that nature. And then I also have a second company, Hub HTX, which is also located here in Houston, Texas. It's a boutique co-working space in the Heights area. So that's kind of what I have my hands full with.
Wow, that's actually amazing. And the fact that you are the owner of two amazingly functioning companies makes you a very amazing role model for us, especially in a sector which is so male dominated. So, talking about that, how has your experience been in the sector?
Um, Well, I mean, I very much enjoy, so again, two very different companies. We'll focus on Anova, I guess, for this
Okay,
question.
yes.
It's been a great experience. Honestly, I started almost directly out of college, so fresh, young face, eager to learn. I had wanted to go into, I wanted to work for the United Nations or some other NGO when I was in college. So this was not like the career that I had chosen for myself, but I kind of ended up, through circumstance working for a company in this sector. And I learned a lot about it. And what really attracted me to it was there was definitely that international component. Obviously, these are, international modes of transportation and all of that. And so logistics is very intertwined. It brings in all of the international trade aspect. So I got to meet people from all over the world, got to be exposed to, different cultures and how people do business culturally differently across the world. It was really fascinating. And, I had some very good experiences early on. Things shifted a little bit for me when I started my own family. It was more difficult to have that work-life balance that I needed. So after a while, I decided that I would go out on my own and kind of do this for myself. And it worked out really well. I think I've been well received in the industry. I think that's largely due to shifting trends within the industry. And, at the end of the day, like if you work hard enough, you know what you're doing, you command and earn the respect of your peers around you.
Wow, Sandra, that's actually the last line, especially was beautiful. And I believe that you are the live proof of that. You have worked super hard. You have built such an amazing career for yourself. And again, you're still balancing the companies along with your family life, which is really tough. And I think only a mother can pull off such a multitasking jobs. And supply chain and logistics is one of those sectors I feel that requires a lot of multitasking. So,
Absolutely.
and talking about managing these things, it definitely requires the amazing skills of leadership. So, what is the most important leadership skill that you apply when it comes to managing everything?
Um, both of these companies are still relatively small companies. I think having a small company presents its own set of challenges. When you have a very large corporate structure, you have one person designated for each role. Within a small company, you've got everybody's, you know, fulfilling different roles, wearing different hats. And so you have to be able to juggle that really well. And I think that's one of those things where I try to instill to my employees is how to prioritize the things that are actually time sensitive and most important, um, and require their attention first, and make sure to kind of like put things on the back burner that can be responded to within a few days, etc. Because I think the human tendency is to go after the easy things first, and kind of check off of your task list, the low-lying fruit. But sometimes you have to tackle the hard things first, because of those are the things that are, again, most crucial for your customer at that particular moment, or for whatever you have going on internally in the company. So I think, being able to mentally organize yourself and know which things to prioritize, that's really, really important. So that, as a leader, that's something that I try to instill to anybody that's working for me. And I'm not much of a micromanager as far as that goes. So, I'm like, here are your roles, here are your functions, these are my roles and my functions. If you do your job well, then I shouldn't have to oversee you too much, and then I should be able to focus on the things that I need to focus on, which are kind of like, where's the company going? What are the next steps? Kind of more of the visionary type of, roles that,
Yeah.
that the leader should be in, right? So, yeah, and I think another thing for us that kind of helps us stand out against maybe some of our larger competitors is our the way that we treat our customers, right? And so that's something that can go across both companies as well, is customer service, customer service, customer service. So while like on the Innova side, we're bringing in the technical expertise and all of that kind of stuff, but also when you call us, generally speaking, you're going to get somebody that on the phone, and we're going to understand your company. We're going to build this relationship, and I think that's really important for me. Same thing on the hub side. Obviously that's a little bit more like service sector type of thing, and it's very important, like, to build those like relationships, because people are coming in, they're tired of working from home, they want that
Feeling.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They want to have like the water cooler conversations. They want to be
Yeah.
mentally challenged. They want to be physically in the same space as other people that are getting work done. And so, that's one of those things where it's like, we want to make sure that they feel like this is their office space as well, and that they're welcome, that it's a inviting environment that, helps them perform at their optimal for their workday.
Sure. Wow, that actually sounds very cool and awesome. And the fact that you have been so clear about how you function, that this is your work, this is my work. If we function correctly, there's smooth function for the company. And I'm
Mhm.
convinced that managing two small companies is more of a task because, as you said, you have to perform so many different roles and functions. And to be honest, like, had the two companies being in the same sector, I think life would be a little easier because the
Yes,
functions kind of match, but the fact that there are different companies gives more challenges to you. So kudos on that. And talking
thank
about the
you.
challenges, what talking about Innova, of course, what is that one challenge that transformed your approach to business and leadership?
I don't know if I could give you a one challenge.
Uh-huh.
I can speak to a recent challenge.
Yes.
So, I mean, and that's the thing, right? I don't think you ever stop improving. You never necessarily like arrive. You never stop striving. Sorry. And so, this year, obviously, with the administration changes, and the tariff policies and all of that, it has largely disrupted a lot of international trade. The business sector, they like to plan, right? And they like to plan for the future. So, this inconsistent policies, been very difficult to plan around. So a lot of the business community is kind of holding back on, long-term projects and things of that nature. So our sector has definitely experienced a slowdown. I would say that we're flat. That has that's definitely been a challenge in this year. It's not too dissimilar from some of the disruptions that we had, during the COVID era as well. And so I think in these times, you have to kind of go back to your skills. You have to go back to like, okay, let's, what have we done right in the past, and how do we, pivot as we confront the future. So I think it's very important to remain versatile, throughout all of this. One of the good things about being a smaller company is that it is easier to kind of pivot and
Yeah.
change direction, because you're not having to get approval by a board and then passing that on to upper management and then passing that on
True.
to middle management and, all of that kind of stuff. Basically when I'm like, hey guys, this is what's happening now, small team of mine, we start working on that pretty
Yeah.
immediately. So that's really important. And I think, understanding that markets are cyclical and recognizing when is the time to start that pivot is very important as well. And so for us, we've kind of moved into a reactive kind of positioning versus a proactive position versus a reactive position. There are times when you're just kind of like the phone is ringing and you're just taking orders, and, you know, things are easy. And then when things get tough, that's when you have to like reevaluate and say, okay, are we beating a dead horse here? And where are the new opportunities coming up that we need to
True.
start really putting that time and energy to research, get a better understanding of that, understand who the players are, and then, go after that. So that's kind of where we are right now. We can't just sit by idly and wait until things get better. We have to start making these changes and making these decisions and kind of, really proactively out there seeking new business.
True. And that's actually an amazing way of functioning, I must say, and very inspiring. Like the fact that you are the main person of the company, you're able to put forward the actual process so beautifully that it becomes easier for us to understand. And the area that you're dealing with, bulk liquids and intermodal equipment, is definitely, as you mentioned, it's a very technical side. You need to ensure that the operational expertise meet with the customer relations. And the
Mm-hmm.
emphasis that you have put on that, I would love to understand how do you manage to ensure the correct combination of the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my job is educating customers, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
customers, they know what they're doing. They call me and they're like, I need XYZ. And they've done this all day, every day. And, that's great. Happy to work with, those
Mm-hmm.
customers. There are
Sure.
a lot of customers, however, that are transitioning from either like an IBC or totes or even like drums, much, much smaller capacity, liters and gallons wise. And then they're seeing, oh, actually I can do the same thing in an ISO tank, but it reduces my transloading time, or I'm able to ship much larger quantities, etc. But they're unfamiliar with the process, they're unfamiliar, with the equipment itself. And so part of the sales
Functioning.
cycle is educating the customer on how these work, what the versatility is, and how it can be used within their business model. So that's something I really enjoy. I think I always, maybe not always, but oftentimes I find myself,
Yeah.
having to kind of overcome the first
Yeah.
hurdle, which is when people see me from the exterior, they make a quick snap judgment, and they're like, "Oh, who is this little girl who's trying to tell me about X, Y, Z?" And I'm like, first of all, I'm old, Second of all, just because I'm small doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. So very quickly, as we start to talk about either, the dangerous goods, talking about the chemical product itself, or if we're on site and we're visiting ISO tanks and they're watching me climb up on top of a tank and educate them about like, the different safety
Yeah.
release valves and things like that, then, within moments, they all of a sudden understand, oh, I'm actually speaking to somebody who is an expert in their field.
Definitely.
And so I think that gives them confidence
Yeah.
to trust that, we're going to be able to give them the right products and all of that kind of thing. So, but it is always kind of funny, that first hurdle, and I think we're all capable of making snap judgments.
True.
But it is something that, I'm constantly overcoming. But it is very important for me to bring the technical, expertise, and then to marry that with the customer relations that we have, right? So for me, I like to establish, a relationship, get to know not only the company and their particular needs, but also, the person, like what is it that they
True.
like to do, et cetera. And, I think the best business fits are when you've got kind of like that. We have all of the things that you need from a business perspective to help you grow. And then we also have like a really comfortable, like personal relationship, and that marriage between the
True.
two, it makes work fun, as
True.
well.
And it feels more of a help, like actually being there for each other rather than being a transaction where you're just
Uh-huh.
like, give me the money, I'll do the work for you. So I think
Yeah.
that sense of feeling where you have served a purpose feels better, I would say, rather than actually just being like, okay, you pay me, I give you the service kind of
Yeah.
feeling. And
Yeah.
to be honest, Sandra, you're too pretty for people to feel that, oh, she's so cute. Why? How is she in the sector? But whenever anyone talks to you, they see that confidence, they see that side of you, which is aware of what you're doing. And that becomes like an added value as to how inspiring you are. Even when we spoke for the first time, the first thing that came to me, it's the eyes, of course. Your eyes will see how pretty you are. Then you talk and
Thank
then you're
you.
like, oh my god, she's intelligent too. She's so awesome with what she's doing.
Wow.
But
All this and
I'm
a brain too.
exactly. You're the prime
Absolutely.
example of that. And talking about this, I feel that there are
I
many
have
women
to
out
say,
there.
we have to stick on that for just a minute, right? Because it is
Mm,
strange. Like, why are we pre-programmed to think if somebody is physically attractive, which
uh-huh.
might I add, you are very pretty as well.
Thank
Why would
you.
we think that that excludes them from being intelligent? Like that's completely like,
No.
you
Mhm.
don't think about that necessarily like when you think about a man, you're like, oh, they're attractive, and you
You
don't
do.
discredit the fact that they could be intelligent as well. But on the
You
reverse
do.
side,
I personally feel that, like, when I see a very good looking, handsome man, my brain is like, ooh, model material. That's the first thought. But that's the point. Like, the first thing that comes to us is that you see it through the eyes checks. Then you're like, oh, pretty. Then it comes to the evaluation of the intellect that, oh, wow, she's super smart. Then it's like, it keeps on adding. And why I personally think that's not true because I thought that too, that oh no, why is not it not for men? But then I realized when me and my female friends talk and we see a hot, good looking guy, the first thing we're like, ooh, pretty. And we forget that man might have some brains too.
if only. Oh, but yeah, it is one of those things where, we do make,
Yeah.
a quick judgment when we see somebody, from the outside. And I think it's important to allow a little pause in our
True.
judgment and,
Judgment.
see a little bit more as far as things go. But yeah,
Definitely.
it is fun, as far as that goes.
True. And talking about this, I think definitely there are many other women like you who are super pretty and are super awesome with their work. So
Yes.
But again, the sector is male dominated and it's highly
Absolutely.
operational.
Yes.
So, how do you, so just like that, you're a pretty woman out there. It probably is hard to prove your worth before because, as you said, they make an image about you that, oh, pretty women. And then they're
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, I'll see later on if she's smart or not. So, how do you function with that?
Well, we had a conversation before this podcast, and
We
I
did.
shared with you like a small memory, and so I'll share that again. And I think we're seeing some positive trends in our industry. But I remember when I was, I started when I was 24, I think. So I was fresh out of college, and so I went to a trade show with my bosses, two men, at that time. And I remember, as we were walking around, there were more than one booth that had, women there who were not with the company necessarily. They were just hired as models, and I mean, from my memory, I recall them just wearing basically like a bikini or something like that, and then walking around with like the company signs. And I was just like, wow, really? Like, here we are at the 2000s and you're still seeing that. I travel a good amount. I go to different trade shows, etc. And I'm happy to report that I see less and less of that. The last one of the large transportation and logistics shows in Munich that I was in earlier in June of this year. They did have some fantastical eye-catching stuff, but one of them that stands out in my mind is I don't remember if she was Greek or anyway, she was an amazing cellist, and she was
Yeah.
out there and she was playing her cello and like performing for everybody. And I mean, it was such a huge draw, but in the right way, right? We were showcasing her
Yes,
talent,
talent.
not her
Exactly.
talents. And so I think we are moving away from
Exactly.
where it's not so much appropriate to objectify women as much, but to actually see like what lies beneath
With it.
and
Mhm.
letting kind of the intellect stand out. And so I'm happy to see, in the industry, which I've been in for over 20 years now, I see a lot of women in top performing, top management roles, top sales roles, and they're killing it, and they manage very large teams. They're in charge of large geographical regions within their company, and they're doing really well. And I think for a long time, I think everybody recognized, women a lot of women, we can't say we're
True.
a completely homogenous group because we're not, right? We all have our individual strengths and weaknesses. But overall, women tend to be very organized. And so that was largely relegated to the administrative roles, and to the
Yeah,
support roles for a long time.
true.
And we're seeing, that after time and like proving their worth and all of that kind of stuff, women are fighting for the opportunity to have these higher level positions and excelling really well at that. So I'm happy to see that shift and that trend, and they're managing their own teams and being very successful with that. Um, Let me see. Oh, I wanted to share another story with you.
Yeah,
So, just again, women in male dominated, workforce industries, et cetera. So if you look at the mechanics, the people that are actually out there working, repairing these tanks, these chassis, obviously a good portion of them are men,
true.
and right now we're talking about like logistics and supply chain and kind of, office type of roles, right? Like, sales
True.
administration, like all of that kind of stuff. But I actually was really, it was inspiring to see, this one woman. I think she goes by her like nickname is Mina. She works
Okay.
at the Demi Depot here in the Houston area as well. And so they had a grand opening. They were doing a tour, and she showed us her valve room. And so, she conceptualized, she designed, and she oversaw the rollout of this space. And so it's a whole room that's dedicated to rebuilding, well, basically deconstructing, cleaning, rebuilding, and testing the like safety release valves and airline valves and things like that that go on the ISO tanks, right? So she built this assembly line room. It's a large room, and it's kind of like everything is in its right place, and it's very much reminds me of kind of like, how Ford revolutionized, auto manufacturing. And you've got like the rollout thing and the carts go around. And so every station has what it needs as you're going through the different process. And then towards the end, she designed this very cool, testing thing where it's like you can just test for this, you can test for that, you plug this in, you plug that in, and then it goes to like the final thing, and here's all of your like your rebuilt valves. And so I love that because that's a very, very, I mean, that's like a 90 something percent,
Crazy.
male
Yeah.
dominated role, right?
Okay.
And, she's not only highly successful in that, but she's innovating, in that space, right? She's
True. Yeah.
creating, she's conceptualizing.
Mm.
So I loved it. And I believe she called herself the Valve Queen. And so I was
Oh,
like, at the end of the presentation, I was like, well, hey, I have to introduce myself because I used to be the chassis girl, but since I'm old now, I get to be the chassis queen. I was like, so the Valve Queen and the chassis queen should like, meet. And so we took a little photo together,
oh
and
no.
everything. Yeah, and it was a really nice opportunity. But I love that. It's just, again, it's not dissimilar with like, service in the military and things like that, where you don't traditionally see women in these roles. But, given the opportunity, I mean, we can be extremely successful. There's no reason not to think that we would be, but
True.
still we're having to like reframe this preconception, right? Um,
True.
but yeah, it was just a really cool example, and I wanted to share that.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad to know that she sounds like a very, very inspiring person. And I'm so mesmerized by the idea of what she's building. The fact that she has the courage to do so much in a male dominated sector and succeed so amazingly is great. Like, if I was not specifically focusing on logistics, I would definitely invite her.
Yeah, absolutely.
True. And I feel that the art that all of the amazing women out there have is the art of making it all work. Now, for if
Mhm.
I'm talking about you are making entrepreneurship work with the logistics sector, you're performing leadership. So I'm sure that it must be an overwhelming role. So how do you keep yourself motivated and maintain that resilience during such tough times in the sector?
Well, I think first one of the things that we have to just maybe stop and focus on for a second or acknowledge is the fact that we are human, and we do feel things, and it's okay to feel things. We all have our social programming, right?
Mhm.
In the United States, a lot of your worth is tied to success, right?
True.
So if things aren't going 100% the direction that you want them to go, you can tend to feel like a personal failure, right? And especially when you are, leading a company and you have people's livelihoods that depend on you, the weight of that definitely is completely on your shoulders. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that, we don't have to suppress these feelings. Like, it's important to feel the feelings, right? It's important to understand how to navigate like negative, uncomfortable feelings. Let yourself feel them, go through that motion, feel validated in it if you need to feel validated. Same thing with like the joy of success, right? Like, nobody's like holding you back from feeling
Yes.
that either, you know? And so it's like when you are successful in something, when you see a project come to fruition, like fully feel those feelings of joy, feeling of accomplishment and pride in yourself. I think for women, it's you know, we're taught that we should be like somewhat humble and reserved and all
Yeah.
of these kinds of things. And you know, there's nothing wrong with humility, of course, but there's also nothing wrong in recognizing your own excellence, right? And in recognizing that, hey, you put in a lot of hard work. And so, you know, now you can sit there and say, like, I'm seeing the fruit of my labor and I'm proud of that, right? You know, this was my project, this was my baby, you know, it's all grown up, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. And to take, you know, to take your piece of I made this happen. So I think that, you know, these are all important things. On the negative side of things, you know, when you have, you know, the as you're growing, right? You're making choices, you're going in one direction or another. They don't always work out, right? Best laid plans and everything. And so you can see that as a failure, you know, but I think one of those things is to just like not dwell in that, right? Let yourself feel those feelings, work towards it all. And then, you know, like acknowledge that you've put in all of this hard work and that you've learned in this process and that you've actually probably laid the framework for something to come in the future. You know, so me personally, you know, I was working on developing two other roles within my company that I really wanted to grow. And, you know, I started with one and we kind of got to a kind of a plateau, right? And it didn't go any further beyond that. And then when the second one, like it just never even got off the ground, you know, but I got the contracts in place. I really defined what it was that I wanted and all of that kind of stuff. So for me, it was like I was feeling my feelings, you know, at that point. I was like, man, I've worked so hard. I've spent so many hours on this to not see it come to fruition. And then, you know, after a few days, I was like, you know what? I have to acknowledge and honor all of the hard work and labor that I've put into this. And I know that it didn't happen right now and in this moment, but I've done the work for
Yes.
when the future is right, the right person comes along or the right opportunity comes along, like I'm ready to move on it now, right? And so you have to acknowledge, like, even in those failures, that there are things that you've learned, that there's framework that you've laid and that you've built foundation for other things to come. Or you've learned, hey, I'll never do that again because that was a really bad idea. You know what I mean? Um, and so I think
Yes.
I think those times are some of the best learning experiences that you can have. And so when you're in this leadership role, you have to have the mental fortitude to just kind of push past, right? That doesn't mean you bury it. It doesn't mean you don't acknowledge it. It just means you don't stay in that space, you know? And you have to have a mental toughness to go, okay, that happened, you know,
Yes.
onward and upward.
Wow. That actually, honestly, that sums up my next question as well. You just answered my next question, which was, what is that amazing piece of advice that should stick by? And I think we have it.
Well,
And mm,
I
oh,
will
there's more.
say,
Yay.
you know, obviously a large portion of what we do is
Yeah.
customer interaction, right? And I think one of the things that I kind of learned from my early experiences in the industry and something that I is kind of the core of what we do at Innova Industries is we under promise and we over deliver, right? I never ever ever want to tell a customer that we can do something without knowing that we can do it. And so that is something that's super important for me, you know. So we always are a little bit conservative on what we're able to do, and then I love to surprise them at the end and just like pull through and say, hey, we got this and more for you. And I think that is something that our customers enjoy about the experience of working with us, and they kind of, there's a trust that has been built over time, and I think that, the name Innova Industries means something now, and it's not only recognized, throughout the United States, but also internationally as well. And I think it's like, you show up for your customers every day and you've come through on your promises, you'll be successful.
That actually is so, so beautiful. And I think the line is going to stick with me because I think that applies to anything and everything. Be it
Hmm.
you making your own career choices that under promise but over deliver. Like, say, I'm working towards a specific score in an exam. I can have a realistic score, but I can actually get higher than that. And I think that also increases the sense of satisfaction you feel when you are like, okay, I'm gonna set a realistic goal, but I'm going to work hard enough to get the unrealistic results. So
Yeah,
thank you for
absolutely.
that one line that's going to stick by forever. And I think if I do follow that even for my podcast, I think I'm going to make good results out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it was a great, great session learning from you today. Your experiences, the way you see work, the way you have been in the sector and experienced different sides of it. The growth that you described from being 24 to 20 years from now, I think you are doing great. And yeah, I actually did the math and I'm like, nah, she doesn't look like that. She's just making it up.
That's real. It's real.
I am not believing it, and I don't think anyone who's gonna watch this episode is gonna believe it either. They're like, ah, she's lying. She's just 34.
I'll take it.
You should. I think you are literally like Anne Hathaway. You're so pretty. You don't age. You just, oh my God. I want to be like that too. I hope 20 years after today, I can say the same.
Oh, I have full faith that you will accomplish that goal.
I think I'm gonna take tips from you, then it will come into picture. But I loved our session today. It was filled with fun, humor, learning experiences, some really amazing stories, and amazing people you spoke about. So, thank you for making each and every one of us aware about the sector a little more, providing us this amazing guidelines, and introducing us to your amazing companies. Thank you for
Thank
joining us
you.
today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would say to any, young women that are interested in the
Mhm.
sector, go for it. Make your own mark.
Yes, just like you, hopefully we can also make something out of our journeys into the amazing logistics sector because I feel it has a lot of opportunities, but a little bit
Absolutely.
of fear that pulls us back as women. But amazing, pretty, ambitious, and awesome women like you are making it possible, which is very inspiring for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.